In the sweeping timeline of human history, wars have erupted over territory, religion, succession rights, and political ideology. But few, if any, have the curious distinction of being sparked by a wooden bucket. Yes, you heard that right. A war, complete with thousands of soldiers, bloodshed, and bitter humiliation, over a simple oaken pail. Welcome to one of the most bizarre episodes in medieval Europe, the War of the Oaken Bucket, a tale of pride, politics, and a petty act of provocation that ignited a full-blown conflict between two powerful Italian city-states. To understand how this peculiar war came about, we need to travel back to 14th century Italy, a land not yet unified as a nation, but rather divided into dozens of fiercely independent city-states. Among these were Bologna and Modena, neighbouring rivals, situated in the fertile Po Valley of northern Italy. These weren't just competing towns. They were symbols of a larger ideological rift that tore Italy apart for centuries. Bologna was a proud supporter of the Guelphs, a political faction loyal to the Pope. Meanwhile, Modena stood with the Ghibellines, backers of the Holy Roman Emperor. These two sides had been clashing since the 12th century, turning the Italian peninsula into a battlefield of shifting alliances and brutal feuds. Tensions simmered constantly, border skirmishes were common, and civic pride ran dangerously high. And then came the bucket. In 1325, a group of Modenese soldiers, likely during a raid or act of sabotage, infiltrated the city of Bologna. What they stole was not gold, not a prisoner, but an ordinary wooden bucket from a city well. An act so petty, it almost seems like satire. But this theft wasn't random. In a world where symbolic gestures carried enormous weight, taking that bucket was a bold, mocking insult. Bologna, understandably, was furious. The bucket had been taken not just from a public well, but from the very heart of the city. It was as if the Modenese had stolen the Bolognese sense of honour itself. The bucket became a symbol of defiance, of mockery, and ultimately, of war. Bologna's leaders issued a formal demand: return the bucket. Modena's response? A resounding refusal. Humiliated and enraged, Bologna declared war, and what followed was no minor skirmish. Bologna mobilized an army of over 30,000 men, a mix of knights, foot soldiers, and allied forces from other Guelph-aligned cities. Even the Pope, John the 22nd, lent his support to the cause, hoping to see a Ghibelline stronghold crushed. Modena, on the other hand, had a much smaller force, around 7,000. But they had something Bologna lacked: better training, more disciplined command, and crucial support from German mercenaries. Despite being outnumbered nearly 5-1, Modena prepared to defend its city, its pride, and yes, its bucket. On November 15th, 1325, the two armies met in a valley near the small town of Zappolino, a strategic point between the cities. The Bolognese, flush with numbers and confidence, assumed victory was imminent. But the Modenese commanders had something else in mind: a clever use of terrain and timing. As the Bolognese forces pushed forward, their lack of organization began to show. Modena launched a precise counter-offensive, breaking through the center of Bologna's line and causing chaos. Within hours, the great Bolognese army crumbled. Thousands fled the field, abandoning weapons, standards, and even their commanders. It was a humiliating rout. The mighty Guelph city, with the backing of the Pope himself, was defeated over a bucket. But Modena wasn't done. They decided to twist the dagger. After the battle, Modenese troops rode up to the very gates of Bologna, held mock games in full view of the city walls, and taunted their enemies with songs and gestures. Then they returned to Modena, still proudly carrying the stolen bucket. That very bucket, the one that sparked this war, was mounted inside the Torre della Ghirlandina, Modena's central bell tower, where it remains to this day. Preserved in iron chains and glass, the bucket is a permanent trophy, a monument to victory, defiance, and perhaps a bit of medieval pettiness. While the War of the Oaken Bucket lasted only a few months, its legacy has endured for centuries. It became a symbol of absurd warfare, an example of how pride, honor, and politics can inflate the smallest slight into national drama. Italian poet Alessandro Tassoni even immortalized the war in his 17th century satirical epic La Secchia Rapita, or The Stolen Bucket. His poem turned the entire affair into a fantastical comedy, blending real history with myth and mocking the very concept of honor-driven conflict. Today, school children in Modena still learn about the bucket their ancestors refused to give back. And every visitor to the city is reminded, sometimes wars are fought not over gold, but over the things gold can't buy: pride, reputation, and defiance. In a world still full of rivalries and national pride, the War of the Oaken Bucket remains strangely relevant. It teaches us that even the smallest actions, a stolen item, a mocking gesture, can ignite the flames of conflict when tension is already high. But it also reminds us to laugh, to question, and to reflect. That perhaps not every war has to be noble or grand to be remembered. Sometimes it's the absurd stories, the ones that seem too strange to be true, that last the longest. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into one of history's quirkiest wars, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating stories.